Ornette Coleman was an American jazz saxophonist, trumpeter, violinist, and composer. His jazz career started in the 40s. In 1959, he released an album called The Shape of Jazz to Come, which is considered a pioneer in the free jazz genre and avant-garde jazz. It's widely seen as being a pivotal album. In 1960, he released an album called Free Jazz, and that gave the genre its name. However, he always disliked the name of free jazz because he always claimed that the stuff that he did wasn't totally free and that it did have some structure to it. Some of his music has been described as being angular, particularly melodies. I have no idea what that means. In the 1970s, he embraced electric instruments and a genre of music called melodic funk, which he created. He had a band called Prime Time. Melodic funk, I'm going to read a sentence out from Wikipedia. It is associated with avant-garde jazz and free jazz, although its implications extend beyond those limits. So if you think about whether avant-garde jazz and free jazz have any limits, the intention here is it goes beyond those limits, whatever they are. He died in 2015, and he has got a sizable discography, but not as big as most jazz luminaries that have been around for that sort of length of time. Hi, my name's Dan. So this is an album of free jazz, or possibly avant-garde jazz, if you prefer. I think the terms are fairly synonymous. There's going to be quite a bit of description to try and go through for this. So instruments, we've got a couple of saxes, a trumpet, an upright bass and drums. In other bits, we've got a violin and a pocket trumpet, whatever that is, and a musette, which is some kind of reed instrument from China or Iran or somewhere. I looked it up and I got a bit confused. There's also a person called Asha Puthli, I might be pronouncing that wrong, doing some vocals on a couple of tracks, and a guy called David Henderson doing recitation is what he's billed as. And I think we'll talk about that track in a little bit. So it's yet another exploration of the outer limits of jazz. I'm getting the impression that Ornette Coleman was particularly known for doing this. I would say it's not without structure. Sometimes even some of the structure is recognizable. The track All My Life is almost conventional. So is, in some ways, Law Years. The first track has an interesting kind of start. It's got a tune which is sung by Asha Puthli and also played on instruments. So it's obviously a written tune because they're doing the same thing, but they're slightly out of time with each other, and I think that's deliberate as well. Other tracks have frantic bursts of brass with backing from the drums and the bass, which is pretty much chaotic. But there are at least three tracks here that follow the structure that I recognise as the kind of classic jazz structure of having a tune and then some improvisation and then playing the tune again at the end. However, when you say tune, it's not necessarily what you might think of as being a harmonically consistent tune in the same way as, you know, we're not used to listening to. But it does, again, it's obviously written, these bits. And often, so there are three tracks, I think, that kind of do this in little bursts and go kind of thing. Science Fiction is one of the two tracks that probably has the most free stuff going on. I actually really quite like Science Fiction, but partly that's because of the franticness of it, but also because this is the track that's got the spoken words in it, and they're kind of snatches, as if they're kind of taken out of a thing that's been written, and then he's just doing every kind of third or fourth word or something. And there's also some baby noises in there as well. It's curious, and the words that are chosen are definitely interesting. Not really sure what's going on here in the mind of whoever chose these words, but definitely an interesting track. So, what I don't know is whether I was in a particularly receptive mood towards this kind of thing when I listened to it, but I quite enjoyed it. I think I'd probably... so it's the second album in this series that I've done that's had Ornette Coleman involved. So I think my expectation was there that it was going to be this kind of free jazz stuff. I think some of that comes down to the textures of the music. So there are other things that are experimental that I don't like. But there are experimental things that I do like. And I'm starting to wonder if this is about the textures of the sounds and the music as it's put together. I enjoy the energy of it. I think having variety helps. So some of the experimental jazz albums that I've really struggled with are ones where you've got a 30-minute track of basically one idea and it just becomes quite dull. That's not the case here. There are repeated ideas through it, but there's quite a bit of variation through the tracks. So I quite liked it. I wouldn't say it's my favourite kind of music to listen to. I will always confess with jazz, and particularly the more experimental end of jazz, that I'm not a connoisseur, so I'm not an informed listener, so I can't point out all the finer points of this. If you are and you want to talk about it in the comments box, I'd love to hear from you. But otherwise, if you've got an opinion, as always, I'd love to hear what you think of the album, or what you think of the review, and anything like that. So that's it from me for now.
No, mother, to be and no father.